I am Vivek Sabharwal, Director at APJ School of Architecture and Planning, Greater Noida, and this webinar on step-by-step approach to net zero energy buildings is an initiative of APJ School, and our expert for the evening is Mr. Ashish Rakheja. And I, along with my colleague, Professor Anand Khatri, will be the moderators for the session. And let me just tell you at the onset that I've known Mr. Ashish Rakheja for many, many years. And though he needs no introduction to the architecture fraternity, but for the benefit of the students, let me give a brief overview of Mr. Ashish Rakheja. Mr. Ashish Rakheja is a partner at Aon Consultants and has a degree in postgraduate degree in thermal engineering from IIT Delhi and has a work experience of over 28 years. He has designed over 2,000 building projects. Let me tell you again, that is 2,000 projects, which includes hotels, airports, industrial projects, retail, commercial, you name it, he's done it all. He has a special interest in high performance buildings, and he has spearheaded the green movement buildings in India, and in his capacity as the role of a chairman of the technical committee of IGBC, and he's also been a member of ASHRAE US. He's widely traveled and has given more than 1,000 talks on the specific design-related subjects, which is very core to his heart. As I mentioned earlier, that he deals with high-performance buildings, and he has over 60 projects with platinum-rated LEED buildings in India. He's trained many professionals and many engineers who have entered into this profession. And let me tell you that he's been a member at various technical committees, more than 20 that I know of. He has written several technical papers. His contribution goes beyond the codes that have been set for various committees, and he's won many awards. So he has done a lot of work in this field for so many years, and it's a great honor to have him with us. His special contribution to the architecture education has been that he has been a visiting faculty at SPA Delhi. He was also a visiting faculty and still is with the APJ School of Architecture and many other institutes. So he has trained and he still continues to train young students into the field of profession. And it's a great honor to have him here. I would like my colleague, Professor Anand Khatri, to take it forward from here. And I'm sure that it'll be a very enlightening experience for all of us. And again, welcome all my participants who have joined us just now. So over to you, Professor Anand.
Thank you so much, Vivek sir. Welcome, Mr. Ashish Rakheja. I must inform my participants, all the participants of this wonderful webinar, that the world by large right now is screeching towards a net zero world ahead of us. The Chilean presidency on the 25th session of the COP25 announced a renewed climatic ambition alliance in which 73 countries have committed to accelerate action by 2020 to achieve net zero CO2 emission by 2050. It lays emphasis that USA, China, and India have to show the way. The task of net zero and the act of undoing the damage is unfathomable. We as future and practicing architects must play our role in this and action the rapid urbanization to better ends. None else could be better to discuss the subject but Mr. Ashish Rakheja, who has been demonstrating net zero through practice.
Thank you, Professor Sabharwal. Thank you, Professor Khatri. That's very kind of you to for the introduction that you gave. I'm deeply humbled. I'm really grateful to the APJ College. as Professor Sabharwal mentioned, that I have been a faculty there. I have come and given several lectures out there. I always enjoyed being part of the student community. It's been now nearly about 20 years that I've been going to one or another architecture college to meet the young students, to talk about various subjects which are there. And I still, and now currently I come across many of my students who are practicing architects. They're doing very well, and they all remember the classes on the services that we have had. So it's a privilege today to be given an opportunity to talk to the young students that are there, and I believe there are some professionals also which have joined today, because I see few names that I do recognize. The topic today is step-by-step approach to net zero energy buildings. This is a topic which is gaining a lot of importance today in the industry, for a simple fact that the world is now looking at net zero living. Net zero is all about sustainability, is the ultimate barrier for the sustainability. Once we cross that barrier, we are in a sustainable building zone, which do not encroach upon the well-being of the planet. Currently, at this point of time, the government of India has set up an initiative. In fact, the governments across the world have set up an initiative to start moving towards renewables. In fact, countries like Europe, many countries in Europe have a clear mandate between 2022 to 2030. Most of their buildings new buildings will tend towards net zero energy buildings. I'll talk more about those aspects. In fact, even a society like ASHRAE, I'm sure many of you would know ASHRAE, is the American Society of Air Conditioning Engineers, which has and the ASHRAE documents or the standards which are available are always considered as Bible by the air conditioning engineers. ASHRAE has also set a path for a net zero energy buildings, and all their high performance building standards are slowly converting into a net zero energy building standards. Government of India also has a similar vision. Already MNRE, BEE, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, they're all talking about net zero energy buildings, and going forward, you would see many of them. At this point of time, in India also, we are seeing the private industry taking active steps towards going towards net zero energy buildings, and that's why this talk is very timely, because it will give you an insight of what the net zero energy buildings are and what's happening in our country. Why I've termed this presentation as a step-by-step approach. I've tried to go to the fundamentals, down to the real basics, and how the talk has been structured is, first we'll go around understanding the fundamental of the net zero energy buildings, that how do you go around making a net zero energy buildings, and then I'll explain the same concepts using what we call a couple of case studies. So I'll bring out 4 to 5 case studies in the end, and finally what's happening towards the rating systems for the net zero energy buildings too. So those are the students who are interested in pursuing this area of work towards sustainability and high performance building should make a note of this, because this is something which is the future of human living. Let's understand what the net zero energy buildings are. First of all, zero, as I said, is the ultimate frontier in sustainability. Zero or shunya. What does the zero means? What does the net zero energy means? Just imagine a building with no utility bills. Today, I'm sure many of us at their own houses would always be worried about the electricity bill that comes to us on a monthly basis. Imagine a building which does not get any electricity bills. Imagine a building where we do not have ugly power lines coming to our building at all. We are independent of the grid. We are standalone. A building which is completely standalone. A building where there is no cost for cooling. Whenever we run an air conditioning system or air conditioners at our house, we are assured, like we always say, each air conditioner means 1,000 to 2,000 rupees of electricity bill gets added for that household every month. Just imagine a building where there is no cost for cooling or heating. A net zero energy building would be one where we utilize the natural resources fully, completely. and the building has a minimal carbon footprint. Such a building would be an earth-friendly building, would be an environment-friendly building, and would be a net zero energy building. So that, in short, is a definition of what a net zero energy building would be like. Has the net zero concept been around? If you go back in the human history, we have always been net zero earlier. Entire human civilization originated from a point where we did not encroach on the planet at all. It's only now, as the consumerism is growing, that we have been using the resources which are far more disproportionate compared to what is nature allocating to us. On a lighter note, you see on the screen the early experiments that we have had with net zero energy living. That's how the human civilization evolved. Let me start with the fundamentals. Before we talk about net zero energy buildings, let's understand the concept of net zero buildings. It's important to understand this point because there's work which is going on all of these areas, and it affects each one of us. Today, there are many buildings which are going net zero energy. So in a net zero building category, the first category is a net zero energy, and there are many such buildings there. I already spoke in my opening remark when I said that the governments across the world and even here in India have started taking a position on the net zero energy buildings. Going forward, there is a concept of the net zero water buildings is coming up. Now, these are the buildings which are independent of the water supply which is coming from the municipal sources. That means these are the buildings which harness the water from the sky and also do water conservation using water efficiency fixtures and water efficiency measures. So once your consumption in the building matches what you are able to capture from the sky, that's the time you get what we call a net zero water building. Already with the humans, with the Indian cities today becoming water starved. If you would have read about the newspaper articles where they say that Bangalore in India is going to be the first day zero city. Day zero city is a city where a city runs out of water. Johannesburg, Cape Town are the names that we keep hearing in South Africa, which have already gone to a water scarcity levels which are unparalleled. Similarly, here in India, there are a lot of buildings, a lot of cities which are now staring at the water scarcity, and they are very close all around us. You'll be surprised that even in our hill stations, just about the last year, you would heard in the newspaper, you would have read in the newspaper that Shimla had to turn back the tourists. In the month of May and June, there was no water in the city. All the natural water bodies which were there were dried off, or the water had drained out, gone into the plains, and there was no water there. So tourists were asked either not to take a bath or go back to the plains and drive up and down on a daily basis. The water to the city was coming from the plains, and just imagine how unsustainable that could be. So today already in the country, there's a talk about net zero water buildings, and there are projects, there are buildings which are being developed where the water balance is being closely studied, and the intent is to develop what we call a net zero water buildings. The third category of such buildings would be a net zero waste building. The intent here would be we minimize the landfill. All the waste which is going into the landfill areas are minimized, be it a construction waste or be it the waste which is generated during operation of the buildings. Such buildings are also being contemplated, are on the paper, are being designed at this point of time, because again, the menace of waste that we produce is troubling everyone, and that's why this concept of the net zero waste buildings is also being talked about. Finally, the last frontier would be net zero carbon buildings or carbon neutral. This is something that we'll be working towards. It's still a work towards future. That's the ultimate goal, because when you become carbon neutral, there's a lot of preparatory work that needs to be done in this area yet in our country in terms of the data, in terms of availability of materials. All that work needs to be done before we move towards the net zero carbon buildings. So while the net zero carbon is still few years away, already the net zero energy, net zero water, and net zero waste buildings are becoming a reality in our country itself. Each one of the topics that you see here, whether it's a net zero energy buildings, net zero water buildings, net zero waste building, is a lecture topic by itself. It can consume more than an hour just to talk about each of the topics. For this talk today, we're going to limit ourselves to net zero energy buildings. Let's understand what a net zero energy building means. Just imagine if you got a building where you are running on renewable energy. Now, what would a renewable energy source be? A renewable energy source in Indian context could be solar, which is the most popular. It could be wind, which is generally available in coastal areas only. It could be biomass. It could be geothermal. But generally, since India is blessed with the solar god has been very kind to us, we generally talk about renewable energy source as being solar, because most of our Indian cities get plenty of solar, and we are able to generate solar power quite satisfactorily. So if I talk with respect to the solar only, or just to explain the concept net zero energy building. So if I have to run a building, operate a building, meet the power demand, the daily power demand or the annual power demand using a renewable source, I can generate the power in the daytime. In the night time, I'll need to run on storage. That means either I generate more in the daytime, store it, and the nighttime consume it. Or the second way would be, because since the storage is something which is expensive, storage is not environment friendly also. So another way could be that I generate more in the daytime, consume what is required by the building, and send the excess power to the grid. And in the night time, draw the power from the grid. And if I've got an electrical meter which is put at the entrance of my building, and it is monitoring the power which is being sent to the grid and monitoring the power which is coming from the grid, and the net sum is zero, we will call it a net zero energy building. So typically, we always define the buildings, this category of buildings, as a net zero energy building, not a zero energy building. And that's why this is a term which is globally used. It's used across the world by all the experts, and it is called net zero energy building. That's the genesis behind it. Understanding further, how do you design a net zero energy building? This is the triangle. This is the energy triangle. What you see at the base is the energy consumption. If you see the cursor or the mouse that I have on the screen, you can see the energy consumption right at the bottom. This pyramid or the triangle has got a huge base. That means the energy consumption is large. If I put renewable energy source to offset the whole of this base, the amount of renewable energy source that I'll have to install is going to be large. But imagine for the same building, if you as young architects design the building well, taking care of the passive measures like building form, orientation, window wall ratios, sunshades, envelope, take care of all of these measures, what will happen? The energy consumption would come down. What we have seen in past is a well-designed building with a good passive measures. Just the passive measures itself could help the energy consumption of building to come down between 20 to 30%. So imagine now the base of the triangle shifts to the bottom of this green box, and it's much smaller than the blue box. That means my energy consumption has fallen down. At this point of time, the engineers kick into the action. They look at the air conditioning systems, they look at the lighting, plumbing, elevators, whatever is consuming power, whatever mechanical equipment, electromechanical equipment are consuming power, they look at that. That's what we call active measures. Once we have taken care of the active measures, my base of the energy consumption of the same building is now here at the bottom of the orange triangle that you see here. this base is much smaller than what we started with, or the blue base that it was there. Now, if I put the renewables to offset this energy, you can yourself see how much energy am I going to require at this point of time. Very little. So it's important when you're designing a net zero energy building, do not fight the nature by going for a building which is inefficient, which has such a large energy base, because when you're fighting that by making the net zero energy building, your cost of the installation of the solar panels or any other renewable source is high. The payback to such buildings is going to be long. Imagine for the same building, if we are able to move in here, the base being smaller, of course, the amount of renewables that I have to put for the same building is going to be much smaller, and the net zero energy building becomes a reality. I'm asked this question many times. How much does it cost extra to make a net zero energy building? And I'm sure this question I would have got today also. I can tell you straight, look at the triangle here, is the same building. If I've got a poorly designed building, this is the cost of the renewables. All of this, the blue box or the green box that you are seeing, are the hallmarks or is a requirement for a good building design. And if I've designed my building well, for the same building, my energy base is now only this much. So what are you spending extra? You're only spending extra cost for putting the renewables to offset this energy consumption in the building. And that is the additional capital cost that you're incurring. If you have got an inefficient building, you are incurring this as the extra capital cost. If you got a efficient building, this is the base that this is the cost that you're incurring. So obviously the cost also varies depending on how efficient or inefficient that building is. I was going through the YouTube and I came across this old ASHRAE video, which in very simple terms define what an approach to net zero energy building should be. I'll play the video. I'll stay quiet while the video is going on because you'll hear the sound. Hopefully you'll be able to see the video moving, and you'll notice that whatever I spoke about, starting with the passive measures, going on to the active measures, and finally the renewable energy, is the same message which is given out here. All right. So I hope you were able to see the video. I hope you were able to get the sound also on your computers. Question is, where do we start from? How do we start such a building? Answer is very simple. Stick to basics. First of all, as young architects, please design for the climate. A building has to be climate responsive If you're trying to fight the nature, what will happen is our energy consumption of the building will go up, because that fight will be through using active measures, which is the electromechanical equipment. And those are all energy guzzlers. And we will end up, if you were to develop a high performance building, a net zero energy building, we'll end up fighting it. The second is there's plenty to learn from the history. I don't need to tell you all because you know better about it, but there's a story which our old buildings tell us. Let's learn from the history itself. Revisit the traditions. In fact, I gave a talk a little earlier where I spoke about Vastu and green buildings, and their talk, the principles are basically the same. Let's learn from our tradition. Harmonize with the nature, as I said earlier. Harmonize with the elements that make up the nature. Do not fight it. Have a building which respects the nature, which takes care of the passive elements. Once you got the passive elements right, that's the time you apply the technology. And when you got the right passive design combining with technology, you get what we call a high performance building, and converting that into a net zero is all about putting renewables thereafter. I'll move straight to some of the case studies, and this would give you the answer better. It'll sort of illustrate whatever I've spoken so far in last about 20 minutes. This is a building which eco-commercial building. This is probably the first net zero energy building of India. The building came up about a decade back. In 2010, the construction was started. 2011, the building was operational. So about 9 years back, this building became operational. This is why I say this is probably the first net zero energy building, is because there was no net zero energy building before that, which was documented or available at that point that we know of. When this building was completed, it was done by a chemical giant from Germany called Bayer under their climate protection plan, where they wanted to develop several such buildings across the world. And India was selected as a venue. And incidentally, this building is in Greater Noida itself. It's very close to the college, and you can go and have a look at that. So this was under their climate protection plan. In those days, the green scale was all about 69 points were there. Today, the green scale has 100 points. And out of 69 points in those days, this building got 63 points, making it the greenest at that point of time. It got a platinum rating for sure. So this was a demonstrative building, a small 10,000 square feet ground plus one structure, done as a technology demonstration. And what I'm going to show you how step by step this building went for a net zero energy route. What you see at the bottom is a table where there are 4 columns. The first column on the left shows you 3 parameters, which is the annual electricity consumption in kilowatt hour. The second box gives you the cooling load, air conditioning load, which is in tons of refrigeration. And the third one is the carbon emissions in tons. The last box, the fourth box, gives you the improvement that took place with each of the steps. The box number 2 gives you what we started with. So this building had an annual energy consumption of 1,32,000 units. And the fourth box tells you what happened once each of those efficiency features were brought into the design. So here, the orientation itself helped us to cut down the energy consumption by 1%. And you can see what happened in the reduction in terms of the annual electricity bill, what happened in the reduction in form of the air conditioning load. This building, if you would have done conventional building at that point of time, would have had a load of about 77 odd tons. The air conditioning load reduced, the carbon emissions reduced, and the annual energy consumption reduced. So just the orientation, which is what I said in the beginning, right passive measures helps you to cut the energy by 1%. Take it further, go to the insulation. We insulated the roof well. Today, if you look at the Energy Code of India, or what is called the ECBC, Energy Conservation Building Code, ECBC talks about importance of roof insulation in all the climate zones of India. And this building followed those principles, put the roof insulation there, and we got a 3% saving in the annual electricity bill. And you can keep watching the box down there, how the reduction in the cooling load, how the reduction in the annual electricity bill is taking place. Moved on to wall insulation. This may sound something strange to you because wall insulation is something that we do not practice too much currently in India. But if you look at the ECBC code, the Energy Code of India, you will find the wall insulation is specified as a desirable, in fact, as a must requirement for all the climatic zones, and especially the climatic zone where the Delhi NCR falls in. This building had the roof insulation, had the wall insulation, which helped us to save 3% of the electricity bill. Going further, we looked at a good glass, which balanced the daylight, heat, and the glare, and we got 2% energy saving there. We looked at the interior lighting. They were all designed using simulation tools, the lighting falling on the surface only of the table or the workstation, and using high performance lighting energy or lighting fixtures. We looked at the daylight sensors. These are the sensors which are put closer to the windows where there's plenty of daylight coming in, and what they do is they switch off the artificial light when there's plenty of daylight. Moment that daylight becomes less, that's the time the artificial light slowly, with the help of dimmers, starts glowing. So the user which is sitting there will never come to know the change in the lux levels will not be apparent, and they will get what we call a visual comfort while sitting there. So these daylight sensors were introduced, which helped to take away the human errors and ensure the lights are only on when they are required. The occupancy sensors were used in areas like toilets, pantries, or mechanical rooms, so that the people do not leave the lighting on there accidentally. We went to even the external lights, the lights which are outside the building. Even they were optimized using the simulation tools and putting the right lighting. That gave us a 0.1% saving in the energy. Now you would say, why am I talking of 0.1%? The reason I'm talking 0.1% is just by selecting the right external lighting, we reduced the need for installing solar power panels equal to 0.1% of the annual electricity bill there. Going further, the daylighting was optimized. As I said earlier, we had 90% of the areas which are daylit. I'll show you some of the pictures which of the finished building, and you also have noticed the quality of daylighting we're getting there. The client was quite driven. In fact, they went out into the market and selected even the office equipment which were best in class. The photocopiers, the printers, or the personal computers, all of them were tendered out, and only those equipment were selected which were consuming least amount of power amongst all the contemporaries. We benchmarked it. We could save 5% of energy here also. We use a central air conditioning plant with chill beams. It's a convective cooling system which does not require ducting, and you don't need to force the air. It uses the natural convective current where the hot air rises up, comes in contact with the cold surface and falls down. So you get cooling with the natural convective current, which helped us to save further energy. Even the fresh air which was being added to the conditioned space was done with the help of the carbon dioxide sensors, where depending on the number of people, the amount of fresh air was also varied. That means if you got 10 people in the room, you send in fresh air equivalent to 10 people. If you got 2 people in the room, you send in fresh air equivalent to 2 people. The exhaust which was being done from the building, that means what was going out to toilets and all, was cold, because the toilet suck the conditioned air from the rooms, from the nearby areas, and throw it out. Why waste that energy? We recovered that coolness from the exhaust air also, recovered it, and made our fresh air, which was hot, we pre-cooled it with that. Chillers which were used were efficient. They were best which were available at that point of time. The pumps were very efficient, and overall the combination of the active and the passive measures helped this building to save 60% of the annual electricity bill. And thereafter, it was simple. You put the solar panels equivalent to what was the annual energy bill. 60 kilowatts of solar panels are put on the roof. These are some of the images that you see of the building under construction. These are some of the shots that you notice are from once the building was completed. See the quality of daylight. There's not even a single artificial light which is required in the building. The daylight is plenty. These are some of the shots from outside the building. You would notice the big overhang on the roof. That overhang had two purposes. First, of course, to shade the windows below. The second good part was to install the solar panels. We needed that extra area on the roof to install the solar panels, and this is the final image which is there. And you can notice the solar panels on the roof that are visible out there. Finally, this building in its first year, it consumed 64,000 of units of electricity, whereas the generation was 72,000 units. So you would have noticed the building produced excess solar power, that is produced excess energy which was sent to the grid, equivalent to 8,000 units. And the building was not a net zero energy building, it was a net energy positive building, making it a step above than what it was designed. Going further, this is a building which is done by the Government of India. It is here in our own city in Jorbagh in Delhi. Once the lockdown finishes, you can go and have a look at this building. It stands proudly. What you notice, the big wings on the roof, the span that you see there, they are again the additional area which is required for putting the solar panels. This is the place where this is the headquarters of Ministry of Environment and Forest. All large projects necessarily go through a clearance in this building itself, which is a net zero energy building. There's another building that came up around the same time, which is called Shunya. Shunya means zero in Hindi, and this was a first net zero energy house of India. What you see here, the construction process of this house, there were these 4 freight containers which were taken. These were old freight containers lying in the dump. 2 of them 80 feet containers and 2 40 feet containers, which you see at the back of the lorries which are carrying these containers. These old freight containers were put together. You can see the image here. Doors and windows were cut out of it. They were joined together. A courtyard was created in between to get the natural light in. A frame structure was created on top to install the solar panels. And on the left bottom is what the conceptual image of the house is, how it was conceived. This house was a model house. It had rainwater harvesting system. There was a kitchen garden. There was a green wall, harvesting pits, and everything what an ideal house should have. This is what the final product, finished product was. This is how it looked like. And you can see the solar panels on the roof, and you can even notice the ribbed structure of the containers which is there. These are shots from inside the house, well daylit. There is a small LED on the left top that you would notice there. That's an LED that's a meter actually, which is monitoring the amount of power which is being consumed in the building and what is being produced in the building. So it's a small meter which is keeping a record of that. On the right is the courtyard that you notice there. I'll show you more images. This is the courtyard, and look at the amount of daylighting which is bringing into the space itself. The furniture here in this house was also recycled, taken from a Kabadi Bazaar and recycled and used in the building itself. See the shots which is there. This whole house was transported because it was made out of freight containers. It was transported to an exhibition which was held in Delhi, and nearly 50,000 visitors came and visited this house. It was visited by a lot of students, and a lot of parents also came to have a look at what the future living would be like. Let me move you today to the modern case studies, some of the newer case studies. And this will tell you about the rising challenges of the net zero energy buildings and the tools which are available to us to design similar buildings. This is a building which is coming up the eastern part of the country on a small piece of land which is about 800 square meters only. The building is going tall, 45-meter tall. The challenge with a tall building is that you have very little area to put the solar panels. The roof area is just this much, and that's not adequate. The solar panels there installed are not adequate to take care of the annual power demand of the entire building. So what we did was, we studied the solar range or the shadow profile of the building, which it casted around the year on the ground. We found a small area on the ground, which is indicated in green trapezoid, where there's no shade being casted by the building or shadow being casted by the building around the year. There was a parking area which was introduced there, and on top of the parking, solar panels were installed. So it's about question of stealing whatever area we could find to install the renewable energy source. Thereafter, it was decided that we'll put the solar panels on all the 4 facades and including the roof. So all the 5 exposed surfaces which were available, we decided to cover them up with the solar panels. Now it's easier said than done. Moment you put solar panels on the walls, all the 4 walls from outside, on the glass, what will happen is, these were conventional black solar panels, you would lose the visibility. So there'll be nobody will be able to look outside. There's no view available. There's no daylight coming in. That's not what a building you like to be in. So here, there was a perfect balance which was arrived in terms of daylighting, glare, views, and performance of the solar panels. And I'll show you the process. So this is how we were used. The computer simulation tools were used. The solar radiation is being studied. On the y-axis, you will notice is the time of the day, and on the x-axis is the month. And these are the solar radiations which are falling during various months and different time of the day. Similar studies were carried out on all the 4 facades. There's a southeast facade, northwest, southwest, and they were all looked at. Once that study was done, even the solar exposure, that how many hours in the day does the solar energy is available to us. So similar studies were done for all the months, for all the facades. So this is just for the southeast facade. You can see here June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, all of them are taken care of. And this kind of a study was done. This similar study was done for the 4 facades. Once we got the idea, what is the kind of solar radiations falling on the facade, then we went inside the float plate. So this is a typical float plate. And what you notice here, we are studying the daylight levels. This on the top is the southwest side. This on the right is the northwest side. The southwest was getting the build. If you notice, the float plate is about 96% daylight. But we are getting glare on the southwest side as well as the northeast side. So we had to balance the daylight, glare, aesthetics, and also the energy performance. So what was done was, there were solar panels introduced in an inclined manner on the southwest facade. So they were installed like this, what you see as sawtooth design on the top here. It did stop the glare to some extent, but there was still some glare coming in. To stop that glare further, what was done was, on the smaller side of the sawtooth, at this point, there was a jali which was introduced there. Moment we introduced the jali like this, we were able to prevent the glare from coming in, but the daylight levels fell down from a 96% to 90%. So what we did was, we made the glass clearer. We went to from a 40% visual light transmittance glass, went to a much more clearer glass. As the direct radiations were all blocked, that clear glass helped us to improve the daylight back to 100%. But we still had the problem on the northwest side. There was a glare which was coming in, which was again balanced out by putting the solar panels on that side. And this is the kind of float plate we got in the end. Look at it, 99% daylit, 0 glare, and well-lit float plate. Similar exercise were carried out on all the 4 sides. So you can look at it, southeast, there were something like 8 studies which were done of a different angle of the solar panels, different width of the solar panels, so that we could balance all the 4 elements. Southwest side, we studied 10 such parameters, and we went like this. Once we got to the optimum orientation, optimum design of the solar panel installation, then we could sum it up. This building had the potential to generate from all the 4 sides. From the top, we could generate what we call 228 megawatt hours of renewable energy around the year, which worked out if I divide this number 228 megawatt hour with the total built up area, I come to about 67 kilowatt hour per square meter per year. So this is the number that we could generate from the solar panels there. Now the engineers kicked into action. They designed the building backwards. That means they took this as a target of the annual electricity bill and started reducing the energy demand, which is what I'm going to show you. And you can see here, they've started reducing. We started with about 100 kilowatt hour per square meter per year, as against our requirement of 67 kilowatt hour per square meter per year. And we started bringing it down one by one by using better products and by using the technology. Finally, we could get it down to 66.8 kilowatt hour per square meter per year, which was equal, in fact, slightly less than what the generation capability was, which was 67 kilowatt hour per square meter per year, and you could achieve a net zero energy building design. These are the images that you see finally of the building, what it looked like, and you can clearly see the solar panels on all the 4 facades, on the roof. And this is that southwest side which I was talking of, where the solar panels were inclined. They were allowing the daylight to get in, but no glare, and still we were able to generate the energy on the facade itself. Moving to a last case study, which is at a township level, slightly largish. What you see here on the screen is a township coming up in the western part of the country. A lot of these housings are there. These are residential towers. So what the architect have done here is they've created these narrow streets in between the 2 rows of the towers. The intent is that this narrow street is self-shaded. In this, the pedestrian walking is planned. These are the main roads where the vehicular traffic will be there, and this large area that you see in the center is all about using is the playground, which is all covered with glass. So these are kind of solar shading studies which were done to look at the behavior of this, because this was planned as a net zero energy township. And the intent was we start with even looking at the microclimate generation so that the use of air conditioners could be minimized. We could make people go outside, enjoy the nature, so that they stay less inside the houses. When they stay less inside, they consume less electricity, and the lesser energy bills are done. So these are the annual solar radiation analysis, and you can see here between the 2 towers, the kind of solar radiation which is there is much lesser as compared to what is coming in rest of the areas. Some of the landscape strategies which were thought of in order to shade the walkways or the roads, even the pathways where the open paver systems were used, so that there's a lot of evaporation which takes place of the water, and as a result, the microclimate generation is ensured. A strategic placement of the trees using the simulation model, where the height of the tree, diameter of the foliage, distance between the trees were all scientifically worked out, so that even the landscape has a meaning and is able to serve the purpose. These are the parking strategies, looking at the solar car parks, even the solar trees for car park. This was very interesting, an amphitheater with concrete seats, and these concrete seats have actually got water running beneath them. So even in the daytime, if you go and sit on the concrete seats, benches, or the seats here, it'll be nice and cool, and the hot water which is generated goes into the building, into the township, and is used by the various sources itself. Some of the roofing strategies that you see here. This is the kind of wind models which were generated to study the aerodynamic nature of the buildings. So the buildings are rightly profiled. They do not obstruct the wind movement, but they allow the wind to flow through. So there were things like these were noticed. If you see these 2 towers are not allowing the wind to pass through, and that's why they're being relocated, and these studies were done. I'll show you a closer shot of some of these buildings, and look at it here. This is a CFD model in which the wind is flowing through, and we are studying the profile of the building. How does it obstruct the wind movement? Wherever there's an obstruction taking place, you start solving those areas so that there's a wind flow which is happening there. And I'll show you what we do after that. This was very interesting. You see there is a concave shaped building. The concave shaped building is actually arresting the wind flow. So in the final design, this was turned into a convex shape like this. And when the convex shape was created, then it became more streamlined and the wind started flowing through that. This is a closer shot of some of the buildings, and you can notice how the wind is passing through. These are the kind of areas, they are still devoid of winds. The wind is not coming in this area. So each and every aspect was being studied. And you can see these are the kind of challenges we were facing there. So what was done was, there were these windbreakers which were introduced. These windbreakers were nothing but trees, tall trees. So what they did was, they turned the wind around like this. And even the small, minutest of the areas, it was ensured there's a wind movement taking place. Once you've done all that, it's time to install the water bodies. And the water bodies were all done strategically in the direction of the wind flow, as you can see here. And as the wind passes over them, goes into each and every area, what happens is there is an evaporation which is taking place. It's a colder air passing through, and we expected that the ambient temperature would drop by at least 1.5 to 2 degrees, if nothing more than that. So with that, you achieve the desired result. Of course, after that, you go ahead and look at each building design, which I've already explained. Even basement, we had only one basement here underneath all the buildings. Even the basements were converted into fully daylit and fully naturally ventilated. Traditionally, the basements are always regarded as the dark areas, dungeons, where people don't go or they're scared of going, and they have mechanical ventilation, which are energy intensive. So what was done was, there were 4 big, large cutouts which were introduced, and these cutouts ensured there's enough daylighting. You can see here, 50% of the basement is daylit, and this is the kind of natural air movement which started happening there. Thereafter, more such cutouts were introduced, and 85% you can see of the basement is daylit. This is the lighting simulation model, and look at the strength of the natural ventilation that is taking place in the basement itself. We had no requirement of artificial ventilation for this building at all, these buildings at all. I'll just show you in the last, my own office. Some of the students from the college have been there. I've had the privilege to host them. We are planning to convert this office also into net zero energy office. It's currently a platinum rated office. This is what my office is like. It's a small 10,000 square feet office spread over 2 floors. And see the kind of daylighting we get in our office building. It's 100% daylit office with not even a single artificial light in the daytime required in toilet or pantries also. The office has got a green platinum rating and also a second platinum rating, which is called health and well-being platinum. Whereas the green focuses on the energy efficiency, water efficiency parts, the health and well-being looks at the well-being of the people inside. So it's an office which is first of its kind to get a double platinum rating from Indian Green Building Council. A lot of students who come and see that, and you're also welcome to come at any point of time once the lockdown is over. These are some of the features which helped us to get the platinum rating. Even the artificial lighting which is used in the night hours is just consuming 1/3 of what the normal power consumption of lighting in a building is. Some of the other features are, it's a clean air inside. What you see here is the PM 2.5 levels, which we hear or read about in newspaper during the winter days, where the ambient air quality in Delhi, the PM 2.5 levels go to 500. This office has a number which is less than 15. The temperature maintained inside the office 27 degrees, and we use these high volume, low speed fans, which do not create a sound, but they just create an air movement. And with the air movement and 27 degrees centigrade, people get a feeling as if it's 23, 24 degrees centigrade inside. The furniture is recycled, remodeled from the old office. The energy bill is yet to cross 70,000 rupees for the 10,000 square feet office space. To give you context, typically the similar offices would have an energy bill of 2 to 3 times compared to this one. The last bit, I'll show you what is happening in India by the green building councils. Looking at the success of the green building or the net zero energy buildings that are coming up, there is a net zero energy building rating which has been introduced by the Indian Green Building Council. As most countries in Asia are blessed with the renewable energy source, is but natural the buildings are turning towards net zero energy buildings. There is a body called World Green Building Council, WGBC, and all the green building councils of the respective countries are part of this. So Indian Green Building Council is also part of the World Green Building Council. The World Green Building Council has come out with a directive that by 2030, all new buildings must become carbon neutral or net zero energy. By 2050, the desire is all existing buildings also, that means 100% of the buildings that are there in the world must become net zero carbon or net zero energy buildings. So with that kind of mindset going on, with that kind of vision which is there, you as young architects are well placed to enter this arena and become part of this. The Indian Green Building Council has a rating system for net zero energy buildings called Net Zero Energy Building Rating System. Similarly, a US Green Building Council is a LEED rating system called LEED Zero. Both the rating systems have got similar structure where they look at 1 year power consumption data and also the generation data. And once you demonstrate to them the 1 year data, you get what we call a net zero energy building rating. The focus of this rating system is very similar to what I told you earlier, looks at the passive and the active elements, and it focuses on what we call energy efficiency. Out of the 100 points which this rating system has, 75 points are for energy efficiency. Once you make your building efficient, then the remaining 25 points are given for the renewable energy generation. So focus remains on the energy efficiency for the net zero energy buildings. These are some of the buildings in last 1 year since the time this rating system has been introduced, which have gone net zero. And there are already 5 buildings which are there, including Indian Green Building Council's own headquarters, which is there in Hyderabad. The building is today a net zero energy building with 138 kilowatts of solar panels installed on the roof. These are special solar panels which are bifacial. Bifacial solar panels are those which generate power not only from the top of the panel where the modules are kept, but they also look at the reflective energy which falls on the roof, reflects back to the underside of the panel where there also the modules are placed. So these are called bifacial solar panels. So they have been installed, which made this building an existing building on net zero. This is by Godrej and Boyce. It's an office building in Mumbai, which has gone net zero. This is by ICICI Bank. They are setting up rural self-employment training institutes across the country. And this one in Jodhpur. Again, Rajasthan is blessed with solar. They've got 35 kilowatts of solar, rooftop solar, which is ensuring 100% of the demand is being met through the renewable energy. This is Capgemini, which is a large giant from Bangalore. They also have a similar building. This is a warehouse which have gone net zero. So you can look at the variety of buildings across the country which are going into the net zero arena. At this point of time, there are many such examples that have started emerging. We had, you might have heard about it in the and read about it also in the newspapers, that our Kochi airport is a net zero energy airport. It's the first airport in the world to go net zero energy. Delhi Metro is putting solar panels on top of every metro station. I'm working on the Nagpur Metro where we have solar panels on top of every metro station. So as we move forward, in fact, today there are educational new campuses are coming up. There is a Nalanda University coming up in Bihar, which is looking at the net zero energy performance. I heard about a similar university coming up in Chandigarh area, where they're looking at the net zero energy performance. So what they do is these 100 acres of universities, they set aside a 5 to 10 acre area and put up a solar farm. And that solar farm ensures that whatever the power demand for that campus is being taken care of through those. I just want to end it with a slide which I want to show you how the performance of the buildings have changed and why today the net zero energy buildings are a reality. In 1990s, when I started my career, we used to say a building consumes 20 watts of energy per square foot of area. Suppose I've got a 1,000 square feet of building area, so it's going to have an electricity bill of or power demand of 20 kilowatts. Today, the same building is actually the newer buildings that we are designing consumes 2 watt per square foot of energy. That means what I used to do with 20 kilowatts per 1,000 square feet area, today it's only 2 kilowatts of energy which is required. That's the kind of energy efficiency that has started moving into the buildings. The air conditionings, which used to be done that every 150 square feet to 200 square feet area will do 1 ton of air conditioning, today has shifted that nearly about 700 to 800 square feet of areas are being done with 1 ton of air conditioning. So as we are moving into super efficient building era, well-designed building era where we are seeing more of the buildings, such buildings emerging, it's time that we start looking at net zero energy buildings also, because offsetting whatever the remaining energy bills are today using renewables is a reality, can be done, and the solar also, which is primarily the source which is used in our country, is started becoming so cheap that it's worth the while. So I'll end it by saying that net zero energy buildings is not about how we design, but please remember is how we operate also. A well-designed building, if operated wrongly, we again come back into the same problematic zone. So not only you need to design the building correctly, you also need to operate the building correctly. And my prediction for the future, how do I see the future? A lot of time people ask me, this is how I see the future. This is how we'll use our power lines. What you see, the ugly power lines which are all across the cities, we can put them to a better use. Why throw them away into the landfill? Let's use them for drying the clothes as this gentleman is doing, because we'll be generating our own power and using our own power. We'll not need these things. Thank you so much. That's all from my side. Professor, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Rakheja. Mr. Rakheja, I would request you to turn on your video, please.
I will do that, sir.
Great. I think this is a spellbinding presentation, and I wish we could go on and on, but at this point of time, we also have a lot of questions that people have been writing, and would like to take few questions. So I'll request Professor Anand Khatri to take up few questions. I'm sure we'll not be able to take all the questions, but we'll pick up few questions that people have been asking. So Professor Anand, would you like to take up few questions and pose the questions to
Yes.
Mr. Rakheja? Please go ahead.
I must congratulate Mr. Ashish Rakheja. It has been a very, very detailed presentation, and almost all my questions and all the questions that people are asking have been answered. But there are still a few which I would use to highlight the interest of participants and how much eagerly they have been listening to your discourse. There is a question from Tripti. She is asking, if a net zero energy building, how different is it from a green building?
Well, what is a green building? A green building is an environment-friendly building. A green building looks at many aspects. It looks at energy, water, materials that you use, the environment that you provide to the people, and the site that you select, that with respect to the site design or the building design. The net zero energy buildings focus on the energy aspect only. So in a green building, once you do a green building, which is a well-designed green building, it's bound to have lower energy bills also. Once you have a lower energy bills, all you need to do is you can easily convert them to net zero energy building by putting renewables along with that. That makes it a net zero energy building. So net zero energy buildings are an evolution above the green buildings by turning into grid neutral, as we say that.
Right. I get your point. There is another question wherein people want to know from you, what are the materials that should be used for reducing the gain in heat on walls? Like we have been talking about making walls more well insulated. So some students want to know this as to what is regularly being used.
Sure, I think that's a great question. And what I can say is that traditionally in India, we earlier used to use brick walls, which are clay bricks. Today, with the green building movement, when it came in, the concept of AAC block works, the aerated concrete, so aerated blocks started coming in. Aerated concrete blocks started coming in. These were actually the fly ash blocks, which were aerated, and their thermal conductivity, that means the ability to conduct heat inside a conditioned space, was 1/3 as compared to clay bricks. Today, there's a further evolution. There are better materials that started coming in, machine-made materials. You have AC blocks also, AC bricks also. Then there are other materials also which have got lower thermal conductivity. But going forward, what is going to happen? As I was saying during my talk, insulation in the building envelope will become the norm. Already, our energy code, the ECBC, talks about the importance of insulation. We in India do not practice it, but going forward, it will become a reality, because as the energy is becoming more and more dearer, as we are moving into a high efficiency building era, the use of insulation materials on the walls will also become a reality. I'm sure most of us are from Delhi, that I would know, and since you're from Noida, from the college, you would know about Mall of India. I'm sure many of you would have been there. Mall of India has got insulation on the walls.
Right.
They've got extruded polystyrene boards which have been put outside, 2 inches to 3 inches of extruded polystyrene board, in order to minimize the heat from going in. So imagine a mall, an office, an airport, everybody is looking at insulations in the wall now.
Lovely. I had a question. Through history, we have been using air cavities for increasing insulation, like in aerated concrete blocks, as we discussed. It's air ultimately. But are we using cavity walls of any order, some kind of cavity walls with bison boards or with concrete panels?
So, Professor, I think that's good you asked that question. The cavity walls serve a limited purpose. You're right, it does offer an insulation to us, but that's not adequate. Today, if we are looking at high performance buildings, just doing cavity walls, number one, the efficiencies of the floor plate get compromised. When your plot sizes are small, you're trying to maximize the built-up area. Trying to do cavity walls, that means trying to do rat trap walls. All of those things are now doesn't give us the desired result. A simple insulation, 9 mm, 12 mm insulation inserted inside the wall gives us a far better result. So going forward, like in Middle East, if you make any building in Middle East, it's mandatory to put insulation in the walls. That's what the future is going to be for us in our buildings.
A few of our friends, this is quite a few of our friends have asked this question. Almost 10 people have asked this question, and I feel that this needs to be answered. People want to convert their existing homes into a net zero. So they want to know where to begin. Where is it that they would start to convert their homes into a net zero home?
So I showed you the example of my office. It's the same thing,
Right.
Whether it's office or a house, it's the same thing. What we are doing is, we are monitoring. First of all, we have put meters. Where am I consuming power? I must know, I must get a feedback. Where is my power going? Once I have that feedback available to me, then I analyze it. I realized in my office, one of the main sources is air conditioners, the air conditioning system. So what we did was we installed inverter air conditioners which are 5-star labeled. Now that's the best available in the country. Once I've installed that, my power bill actually came down by 30%. And when it came down, I knew that I've reduced my annual power demand. Then I started looking at lighting. Then I reduced the lighting load. Then I maximized the day lighting. One by one, analyze your areas where the power is being consumed, minimize it. Now, if you've got a house where you're consuming, let us say 10 kilowatts of power, by this optimization method, by monitoring and slowly improving it, you bring it down to 3 kilowatts, from 10 kilowatts to 3 kilowatts. Now you can easily put solar panels equivalent to 3 kilowatt on the roof and make it a net zero energy house. Whereas if you had started initially itself and you had said that I want to put my solar panels equal to 10 kilowatt, you may not have the enough area available on the roof, plus the capital cost is also high. So same house, by better monitoring, optimizing, only 3 kilowatt is what is required. Now I can put the solar panel. So my suggestion would be start by analyzing where the power is being consumed, optimize it, and then go ahead and put a renewable energy source.
I have over 67 questions, and questions are pouring. Some of our participants are eager to know what is the cost of installing a net zero versus the benefit from savings in energy. Maybe some light needs to be thrown on the economy and the issue of zero energy, the net zero issue.
Okay, so again, I get these questions a lot of times. So I can tell you that today, per kilowatt of solar power generation, or the cost of the panels is about come down to 50,000 rupees a kilowatt. In fact, it's going lower also, but you can take it average about 50,000 rupees is the cost of solar panels for per kilowatt of generation. So again, if it's a well-designed building, an efficient building, and then you install the solar panels, you should be able to get your payback in about 6 to 7 years time. If you have not done well, if you're not a well-designed building, your payback could be even more.
Correct. Correct. A few people have asked, what is the net gain in increasing the average daylight, the natural daylight in a building? What happens to the greenhouse effect by letting a lot of daylight inside?
So always, you don't just let the daylight in. In fact, you have to make sure you bring the light, but not the heat. And that is what is a hallmark of a well-designed building, where you study using simulation tools. You're getting the light, but not the glare. So there is no heat coming in, or the heat gain is minimized. You do a balance between air conditioning load reduction, because when your daylighting is maximized, what happens is that you're not burning the artificial light. When you're not burning artificial light, the artificial light always, the light energy converts into heat energy, and the heat energy has to be taken away by the air conditioning. So once you have a natural light and there is no artificial light, your requirement of the air conditioning comes down. So you always do a balance between air conditioning loads, your daylight, and the glare. So you always do a balance between the three, and that's where it's a good building. And that's where these simulation tools come into the picture.
There's one question: in the present situation of COVID-19, what will be the factors that will get affected post-pandemic in designing green buildings?
Great question. I think we are all worried about that, and we are going through it. So we were having a debate on this on the Indian Green Building Council forum also. There was a platform we were debating this. Definitely one thing we are going to see is more hygiene practice that will come in. So the materials that we select currently, the way we operate the building. Okay, let me start by saying, a lot of people are asking that the building should go contactless. That means there should be no need to touch, especially in public spaces like offices, where there are a lot of people coming in from outside. There should be no need to use switches or touch anything to start the things. The door should open automatically. The light should come on automatically. The air conditioning should go automatic. So everything should become touchless. So that's one thing that we are going to see. The second, what we are also going to see, more ventilation coming in. That means more fresh air. One of the good requirements for an air-conditioned building and to ensure that the COVID or these similar viruses do not spread using the airstream is to have good amount of fresh air into it. I'm not saying naturally ventilated, but I'm saying air-conditioned building with more fresh air. So that's another change you are going to notice. There'll also be a better filters requirements and all, because the dust particles and all are also becoming an area of concern. So we would see, as I said, touchless material selections, more ventilation. So both the material selection as well as the active system design are going to get fine-tuned in coming days.
There is this very interesting question. When a person wants to know that we are discussing net zero energy, but what about the energy consumed in the process of selection of material and building of these buildings?
You're right. In fact, if you remember, I spoke about the 4 types of net zero buildings, and I said the first one is energy, the second is water, the third is waste, and the fourth was carbon. And I also mentioned, I said the ultimate sustainability would be when we are able to reach net zero carbon buildings. And that's where the concept of the embodied energy, which is what you're trying to refer, comes into the picture. This is an area where the work is going on. In fact, the colleges need to do a lot of work in that because we need a data bank of the materials with the embodied energy quotients. And that's the kind of work when the colleges take up, when those data banks are built up, we'll be able to incorporate into our design. That's the ultimate frontier. We are moving towards that, but we are not yet reached there.
There are 2 very interesting questions for you. I think I'm loading you on and on with questions, Ashish, but this is the only time that we have with you after this wonderful session. So one question is that the ROI on the solar panels is still very poor when the realistic analysis is done. There is a complaint by a person who is a practicing architect who says that this ROI comes in the way of the use of solar panels. Is something being done at the end of the government or at the end of governing bodies on this?
So I would beg to differ with the gentleman here. Today, every building is putting solar panels and maximizing the area of solar panels. Not because the government regulations are asking, but also because they are saying that whatever we can generate using solar panels, we like to generate within the building. The challenge is when you have a poorly designed building, which is what I kept harping on throughout my presentation. If you have an inefficient building and you are trying to meet some percentage of it, of the annual power demand using solar or renewable source, let us say a poorly building and you put some solar panels on the roof, you are able to meet 1% of the building demand using the solar, rooftop solar. But for the same building, if you make it more efficient, you could be meeting 4% or 5% of the demand. Now, what happens is, the moment you're meeting 4%, 5% demand with the same amount of solar, by making the building energy efficient, your payback becomes better. So it's a question of, first of all, making the building efficient. Yes, the ROI you are saying is right. We have our understanding is between 6 to 7 years at this point of time. It's becoming better. It used to be 20 earlier, 20 years of ROI, which is coming down. There are certain incentives in certain areas which are available from government, but they may still not be adequate for us to reach there. There are a lot of developers or building owners which are looking at wheeling of the renewable power, green power, from outside the cities, and they're making investments into the green energy area also. So it's coming. It's taking time, but it's happening. So I can tell you that every year we are moving further towards the direction of energy efficient, self-reliant buildings.
I think, Anand, we have time for one last question.
One last question, sir. So there are 105 questions by now, but this is the last question that we are taking, dear participants. The last question is that what are the challenges that you still feel are to be taken up in this net zero energy discussion? And in continuation to the same question, the person who is a student from our college asks, what is a solution? Have you been able to meet net zero energy in the case of high-rise buildings?
I think very well put. So the challenges that we are seeing is, look, so far the buildings which were done were all self-use buildings, the buildings which are not very tall. We had area available on the roof to put the solar panels. We were able to maximize the area by doing large overhangs. All those things were done. But as we now move into the mainstream, where the tall buildings also would be having solar panels on the roof and all. So there is a concept called on-site renewable and then off-site renewable. We need to maximize the on-site renewable. That means the energy that we can generate on-site. But ultimately, there was a question I was reading that do these solar panels compromise the aesthetics? Yes, they do. And some of us may not like those aesthetics also. I've also heard the views from some of the practicing architects, leading practice architects, which said, what is the need for a tall buildings and where there's a very small power demand you're able to meet through on-site solar? Why not invest in off-site solar? So yes, those things will start becoming more and more of a reality. But the challenge is the wheeling of power. Suppose you put a solar power plant somewhere in Rajasthan and you want to wheel the power to the building. The government regulations in many of the cities, many of the states have still not changed. They are still old. And they are not amenable to this wheeling of power. They do not allow, or there are certain strange regulations which are there. City by city also I've seen that. So all of those things, as the renewable energy policy starts taking place, shape, it becomes more uniform. The adoption of the net zero energy buildings will become more and more. The challenges we are facing currently are more from the regulatory bodies who do not permit us to install or send the power beyond a certain ratio of what the connected load of that building is. So, but the things will all change. That's where the central government and these bodies are, MNREs and BE that I was talking about, are working towards, because everybody is realizing that the net zero energy buildings are coming.
Yeah, I think we can go on and on, but since there is paucity of time, so I would request Professor Anand to do a formal vote of thanks. And I assure the participants that your questions are noted. And after the webinar, we will send these questions to Mr. Rakheja. We'll request him to answer those queries, and we'll get back to you. Professor Anand.
Thank you. Thank you for this session, Mr. Rakheja. On behalf of APJ School of Architecture and Planning, the faculty, the students, and the director, I am thankful to you for the session on net zero energy. There seems to be a way towards light and better days, and I must say that the discussion has just started. Dear participants, I am also deeply indebted to all the overwhelming responses that we have received through questions and your participation. Do send us more questions, which we will direct to Mr. Rakheja. Thank you all. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Rakheja.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you to both of you.